the salon space is one of the most highly targeted areas during the grooming process. And I said, no, it's not. And she said, yes, it is. And I was shocked, went home, couldn't sleep, did all kinds of my own research trying to debunk her and prove her wrong, because this is a space that I take seriously and that I felt at the time that I was doing everything I could to protect the women that come into and sit in my chair. But I found that she was absolutely correct. During those stages of grooming, women, children, and men who are being victimized are brought into salon spaces or brought into businesses like mine and told that, they're loved and that this is a present, this is a gift, and that getting their hair done is a way that they want to show their love, until one day it's not. And then one day it's used as a way to make them owe them something.
Human trafficking doesn't always take the form we first imagine. It can be found at almost any level of an organization's supply chain. What can compliance professionals do to assess human trafficking risk, and how can they leverage the resources of the organizations they work for to help root out this tragic problem? Gwen Hassan is here to help. This is Hidden Traffic.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Hidden Traffic. I'm very excited today to have as my guest Kelsey Hill. She is the founder of Beyond Beauty for Survivors. Welcome, Kelsey. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm very honored and privileged to be sitting in on this podcast episode with you.
So let's dive right in. Let's start with kind of your background. How did you come to be interested in human trafficking prevention, and kind of what has your journey been to bring you to where you are today?
Yeah, well, it's definitely an interesting one. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I'd be where I am today, I would probably say, what? You're kind of crazy. That's not me.
Well, I would never do that. Yeah.
No, I'm certainly a believer. That is fundamentally the core of my existence is, God is the best part of my life. And so I really firmly believe, looking back at how this journey has played out, he's been a significant role in just the reason I am here today. So let me back up a little bit. I am a full-time military wife. My husband has been active duty for over 16 years now, and we are inching into retirement, and we have found ourselves up here in Wisconsin, which we absolutely love. Being a military wife has allowed me the, opportunity to get to know several different communities in our beautiful nation and different walks of life. I have a heart for service, and I am a small business owner. By trade, I'm a hairstylist, a color specialist. I have bounced around from salon to salon, moving around with my husband and supporting him in his career, which, having a heart for service and working with women, finding different ways to not only empower them, but to use my business in a way to give back to the community has always been a high priority. About 8 years ago, I was working out of a salon in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, up in the UP, and one of my clients worked for a substance use disorder clinic. And this was really my first conversation with a direct affiliate with a nonprofit. So my curious brain wanted to know a lot more on how nonprofits work and, why she was stressed all the time and always asking for money. So she invited me into their facility at this women's center to have a tour, and I was blown away at the gravity of the need that these women faced in their recovery journey. And using my space, again, as a way to give back, I asked her, well, what can I do? And she said, really, it's the ball is in your court. And I looked around at this facility and I saw this couch that was just falling apart. And if you know me, I love good movies. I love snuggling on our sofa at home, and it's just a place of comfort. And I'm looking at this couch and thinking about the struggles that these women faced. And at the bare minimum, they deserve a couch that's comfortable. And so I decided to use my space to do free haircuts for 2 days in honor of this recovery center in order to get them a new sofa. And I was astonished at the turnout and the support of the community and how uniquely of an opportunity it was for me to use my skill sets in that way. Jumping ahead, I was kind of on a high, working for this nonprofit now. They had invited me and hired me in as an event coordinator. So a few years had passed me working with these women and learning about not only their struggles with substance use disorders, but also their many vulnerabilities they face navigating through those waters. And when we were stationed in Florida, I immediately was looking for another nonprofit that was similar to give my time to. And all these doors kept closing, and I wasn't really sure why until my now really dear friend, my ride or die, Alicia Tappan, who is the founder of another nonprofit called Survivor-Led Solutions, sat in my chair, and she told me her story about being personally sex trafficked.
Oh my gosh.
And being a hairstylist and, working with women daily, I was shocked. And really, for one of the first times, I didn't have anything to say. And she shared her story with me, which is just a heartfelt, transformative story of becoming from a victim to survivor to now advocate. And it really inspired me to learn more about what human trafficking was. At the time, I thought human trafficking was just like a Liam Neeson movie. It's a dirty white van, it's a creepy alleyway. It's the thug on the corner.
Well, and it happens over there, right? It doesn't happen here. It happens
absolutely
in places. Yeah.
So she, through several months of doing her hair appointments turned into training sessions for me. And I just kept asking questions and, really naively thinking that my life was never affected by this problem that we face, until she turned around in my chair one day and she said, well, Kelsey, that the salon space is one of the most highly targeted areas during the grooming process. Mm-hmm. And I said, no, it's not. And she said, yes, it is. And I was shocked, went home, couldn't sleep, did all kinds of my own research trying to debunk her and prove her wrong, because this is a space that I take seriously and that I felt at the time that I was doing everything I could to protect the women that come into and sit in my chair. But I found that she was absolutely correct. During those stages of grooming, women, children, and men who are being victimized are brought into salon spaces or brought into businesses like mine and told that, they're loved and that this is a present, this is a gift, and that getting their hair done is a way that they want to show their love, until one day it's not. And then one day it's used as a way to make them owe them something.
And this is just a manipulation tactic. Yeah,
absolutely. And this is one way, many ways that perpetrators groom and manipulate their victims. But I was blown away. So that was 5 years ago. And that was really the pivotal moment in my career and in my story that I decided to make a fundamental change in how I operate my business and how I engage with the community and how I can use my skill sets to do better. That led me to work for another nonprofit in Florida that worked directly with victims in the discovery phase between the first and 14 days after discovery, working to find them long-term rehabilitation. This is where I learned a lot about trauma-informed care and how to work with survivors and working directly with survivors myself. I got very involved in this nonprofit. And in the middle of it all, and in the middle of my exciting journey with them, my husband got restationed and we had to move to Wisconsin.
Yep.
And so in the spring of 2021, this nonprofit loved what I was doing in our relationship and allowed me to work remotely while I was still operating in the salon. And so one day I get a phone call from my boss and I'm in the middle of a haircut. And she says, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No, but I can." And she said, "You might want to." And so again, going back to having a heart for service, I always felt that I would find myself in Africa at some point, but I didn't know how. When I sat down, she said, "We're going to Uganda." And I said, "What?" And she said, "We've been invited by a local church here in Florida that have an extra few seats in their travel plans and want to invite us to see what human trafficking looks like in a third world country because it's so prevalent in a place like Uganda." And I jumped on it just quicker than I think I've ever committed to anything. I just knew in my heart that this was something that was going to change my life. And I really didn't know how at the moment, but I knew deep down in my core that this was going to be another one of those pivotal moments in my story.
That is such a great story. First of all, and I hope this isn't weird to say because I'm not really sure the protocol around this, but thank you for your service. Obviously, your husband's service is what most people think of right away, and they thank him for that. But I know a few, actually. I have a couple of friends that are military wives as well. And it always strikes me that really they do as much service as their spouse does, because they're the ones who are, left at home managing a household and children and often a business or two and trying to maintain relationships with someone who is gone a huge amount of the time. And the kind of stress and emotional drain that brings with it, just know that I see that and I see.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you
for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not something that I hear often, but it's definitely, military spouses are highly unrecognized. We do put a lot of work in, and it's not just picking up the workload at home when your spouse isn't there, but we are proud. We are proud of our servicemen and women and walking alongside them. And we are proud to be a military spouse. I served as an ombudsman for several years, which is a unique opportunity to be a liaison for the families while husbands and spouses are gone and deployed. And so my husband was deployed 13 times. And, it's been a growth journey, but we are very proud of this position and having the opportunity to serve our country. But we are also equally proud we're inching closer to retirement.
I can imagine. Yes. Well, first of all, second of all, I guess now I'm on the second list. It had never occurred to me what a unique opportunity probably military spouses have to be exposed to and see issues of human trafficking, because, as you pointed out, the number of times that you move because the military member is redeployed, deployed again, redeployed, and you're moving locations and often, in foreign countries and moving state to state, all of those things probably give military spouses a unique perspective on human trafficking because they see more than your average person who stays in one place all of their lives. I've lived in Chicago now for more than 30 years now, and I have traveled a lot personally, but I haven't lived all over, and you have. So that would never have occurred to me, nor would it have occurred to me that the nexus between your salon chair and human trafficking was there. And what a fascinating thing to point out, because you're educating me on the fact that salons are used in the grooming process. That's a new thing for me, but it makes perfect sense.
Yes.
So thank you. Okay. Before I get off track again, tell us now a bit about how that trip to Uganda led to you creating Beyond Beauty for Survivors. What was that trip like, and what did it give you in terms of inspiration for creating your own not-for-profit?
Wow, it was definitely a lot. We were there for 12 days. And reminding, the listeners, I was an add-on to this trip to a church that I had never been to and never met a soul at, and was currently living in Wisconsin when I was invited. I did not meet my entire team until I met them at the airport before we left. And so really having a lot of faith and, planning and, really just walking alongside them. We didn't want to come in as a team and make our own plans. So they really had a strict itinerary for the 12 days for us to partner with them, which included street evangelism, empowerment, conferences that they had signed me up to teach at that I didn't realize I was going to be doing. And, just opportunities to get to know the community. First and foremost, my entire history of the last several years really played a role in how I experienced that trip in Uganda, because leading up to that trip, I had been doing, a lot of education. And Beyond Beauty, kind of jumping up a little bit, Beyond Beauty was already something I was planning on creating. Just didn't really know exactly what it was going to be. But I had the name Beyond Beauty up until the day that I left the United States to go, thinking that it might end up being just an education platform. for salon service workers, tattoo artists, and trade workers alike, which is kind of what I had been doing until the day that I came back, and things just changed for the most part altogether. But that trip was 12 days. We spent the majority of the time at a school and orphanage that's led by the church's main benefiting partner. Spent a lot of time with little kids that have been abandoned and really just didn't have parental figures outside of the staff that lived there with them too. It's very shocking if you've never been to a third world country with the amount of poverty that they experience, because I think in all of our deep-rooted core, we want to believe that that sort of thing just doesn't happen. You know, it only exists in the National Geographic catalogs that we see in these super remote areas, but not commonplace in mass amounts of, you know, like general public in these countries. And it was very shocking to see children roaming around the streets, very busy streets with nowhere to go, homeless babies and toddlers. You know, here in the United States, if any of us saw a toddler walking on a street with no parents, there would be many people calling many different types of authorities and resources to figure out why. There's nothing like that there.
Yeah.
It's devastating to see these innocent children and women starving and nowhere to go and no resources to have. So going there as a vision trip to see what human trafficking looks like, you can't ignore the other problems that they face that contribute to them being vulnerable to trafficking, which is poverty, lack of resources, lack of accessibility to the outside world. It was like taking a step back in time, and you just couldn't help but feel like you wanted to do something, but it's overwhelming with the amount of the need. And so that trip really changed my life, because there's so many stories that I could tell, but probably the one main story that I like to share was how I met my now benefiting partner, Marilyn, with Covenant Babies Home. And we were about 8 days into our trip, and somehow we had a large gap in our schedule, and we were driving back from the equator. We had taken a little day trip to see the equator, and our driver said to the pastor and his wife, "My sister's school is right up the road. Is it okay if we stop and you can meet her?" And they looked at each other and agreed and said, "Yeah, we have some time. Let's go." And she had just started this school, and apparently she was struggling to make ends meet, but was housing and serving many, many kids in the community. And we pulled into this school, and I'll never forget the feeling that I had in my heels. It was like my heels were made of lead. And at the same time, it felt as though my heels were being dragged down by rope, tethered to the ground, is the best way that I can describe it. And even talking about it now, it just gives me chills, because it really was an overwhelming and undeniable feeling that God was saying, this is where you're planted. This is where you're meant to be. We were only there about 20 minutes, and we met the owner, Marilyn, and she had a 5-month-old baby boy in her hand that she had rescued, who was abandoned by a trash can.
Oh my gosh.
Alongside many other children that she had. And we asked her to share this baby's story, and his name is Henry. I got to hold Henry. I have photos with Henry, and I was devastated when she told me that his mother was only 11 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And was forced to keep continuing being trafficked and victimized by her perpetrator. And when she got pregnant, they were forced to abandon the baby and go back to work. You know, we don't know if Henry was her only baby. She could have had another child, and she could have had more since. But that's one story of thousands of stories in Uganda alone, where girls are taken advantage of, boys are taken advantage of, forced into slavery, where there is no protection, there's no justice system, there's corrupt government influence, and it's all they know. Hearing Henry's story, I asked Marilyn, well, what do you need? And she said, we just need support, because her goals are the same as mine. She's a smart woman. She's been to college. She wants to offer therapeutic services and interventions and education opportunities, but they can't get there if they're starving.
Yes.
and their main focus is food and clean water. When I left her facility, again, with that feeling in my heels, I didn't know how. Even though I've had history working with nonprofits, this was out of my wheelhouse. I didn't know how to start a nonprofit. I didn't know how long it would take, but I knew right then and there that I had to help Marilyn, and God was calling me to walk alongside him to be an answer for her. And the amount of things that we've been able to do since then has been astonishing. And, really, again, I only owe it to him for the opportunity to be used as a tool. But Henry is now 2.5. He is healthy. He is thriving. We get updates and photos all the time. And I cannot wait to hold him when we go back in June.
Oh, exciting that you get to go back. Oh, that's wonderful. I love the connection that you're drawing between the idea of vulnerability and trafficking, because I think for a lot of people who are listening, they think of people being trafficked in terms of somebody who is looking to make a buck, gets lured into something, or, okay, it's a teenager who's taken advantage of. But you don't think about the fact that this is, in many cases, generational poverty that forces that type of vulnerability into the system. So if you're a child who has grown up without parents, at a bare subsistence level, not able to even find enough food, of course you're going to be vulnerable to being trapped.
Absolutely.
So the idea that Beyond Beauty is really focused on, ameliorating some of those key causes of vulnerability to reduce kind of the supply of vulnerable people into the world of trafficking is a really interesting approach. I'm also a big believer in the idea that what is meant for you will never miss you.
Right.
And that there are some things in life that you are led to that you never would have expected to be led to. And I really applaud your honoring that in your own life and finding yourself planted somewhere you didn't expect to be and taking advantage of that. So tell me a little bit more then about the work of Beyond Beauty. So your benefiting partner is this school, right, in the orphanage there. What are you doing for them now? And what are your future plans for supporting them as well?
Yeah. So we are all about prevention. We're about prevention and offering opportunities for long-term job sustainability, which in my experience working with survivors, having something that is empowering them, something that can help them earn their own money is a very big reason for success and rehabilitation when it comes to trauma and survivor-led solutions to create a future not being victimized. So when we're speaking of a third world country like Uganda, it really comes down to the core and minimum, necessities: food, water, medical care, and education. The average age in Uganda is only 15 years old.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And so I really want our listeners to think about that for a second. There is such a limited amount of individuals in Uganda and a large portion of Africa that do not live past the age of 40. It is very difficult when you're working or when you're in an area where there is such a lack of resources, lack of opportunity to make money, where you can't afford the basic necessities, let alone medical care. There are so many children roaming the streets because their parents have died from AIDS or illness or simple things that could be prevented by an office visit, but they can't afford it. I watched a man dying from a cut on his finger, which if he would have had the funds and the opportunity to get a couple stitches, maybe an antibiotic, which is so accessible here in the United States, his death would have been prevented. So when speaking of children and the preventions that we are trying to put in place right now as a baby new organization, our goal is to keep these children thriving and not just surviving. We have been supporting their monthly needs of food, water, and medical care since we received our 501c3. We have child sponsorships with 24 of the 37 children that live there full time, sponsored by families, which helps to cover those needs as well. Our long-term goals is to create opportunities for higher education and walking alongside the staff at the school to have proper resources and curriculums and textbooks to further their education, because right now they're working with very limited curriculums in their classrooms, limited supplies, which, keeps them, at a pace of not growing like we do here in the United States. And so really our goal for the first year to year and a half is getting those fundamentals in place and a foundation secure for the school and those students so that we can work past that and hire more staff for the school. We can hire Ugandan therapists to come in and offer therapeutic opportunities for these students that have been victimized. Keeping them clothed is a huge thing. Here we have clothing stores everywhere, Goodwills all over. There's very limited access to clothing. So clothes get passed from child to child to child. And the amount of kids that I saw with their clothes literally ripped to shreds, they might as well have not been wearing anything. It's really hard to see. And so walking alongside the school and the educators to provide them with the tools that they need to keep them thriving and not just surviving, then we can start focusing on better opportunities and trainings, to work in the trades or to own a business, or even to receive capital to sell watermelons if they want to, or have their own business, which is a highly sought after job opportunity, is to own your own business. So when I say a business, I'm not saying a brick and mortar like here. It's a tiny little shack that you pay a nominal fee monthly and you can sell whatever you want out of it. And that is such an empowering opportunity for these children. Our mission statement is helping women and children. So not only do we have the benefiting partner of the orphanage and the school, but we also have two other benefiting partners, which are two churches, both run by pastors, couples, a wife and a husband. And this is where we serve our women. And this is exciting because unlike the children, these women most of them have already been through school, or they're already married with kids, or, they have been victimized, but they didn't have resources and they just somehow survived and were able to, quote unquote, move on, even though they still need those services to heal and to recognize the problems that they have faced. But one of the really exciting things that we're doing right now to prepare for our trip in June is we are bringing reusable pads to these women. We have been supporting and purchasing bulk amount of disposable pads for both of these churches since we received our 501c, but it's expensive and they don't have a proper way to dispose them. There's no garbage services in Uganda, so they burn most of their trash and they try to keep whatever they can that can be reused or repurposed. After doing some research, I found that other organizations similar to mine have women and men in their community who are avid sewers create reusable pads that they can take. Now, the reason this is important and why this is related to human trafficking is when you are suffering in an area with so many vulnerabilities and you don't have the access or the funds to buy pads or protective underwear, you just bleed. And I know for some of our listeners that might be hard to hear and might be hard to visualize, but that is the reality. That these women and these girls, when they have their cycle, they're either forced still to go to school and to be bleeding, or they have to stay at home and they just sit on the ground and they do their best to clean themselves if they don't have access to these hygienic products. This is a way that girls and women are targeted by perpetrators in the community and traffickers. They see that these girls and these women are bleeding and they offer and they coerce them with pads that they keep on hand to have them do sexual acts or favors to receive the pad. Now think about that. You think about what your life is worth and you think about what your moral compass and where that stands and what you would do for something else. That they are so vulnerable, they are so extremely dealing with these harsh conditions that they would contemplate and say yes to receiving a pad and doing a sexual favor for someone else so that they can be protected. That does not sit well with me. And that does not sit well with most women that I talk to. And so we had to do something about that. And so the pads are a vital resource to protect these women from being victimized. And I'm excited because we've partnered with a local sewing club And we have over 500 pads created already for us to take and pass out to women and girls in need. So we're doing everything that we can at a basic level to provide essential resources for these women and these girls. We have purchased a soap production machine, is what I'd like to call it. Soap is a high prized commodity in Uganda and most third world countries. It's expensive, where most families are only making about $1 a day. A bar of soap can cost up to $3. So it's not something that families are prioritizing, but it's something that they want and they need. So our first job and sustainable job opportunity that we are providing is this soap production to our churches, which will allow the women to create soap, sell soap, and also use it within their churches. A way to not only make money, but a way to empower them and to give them a new skill. It's quite incredible how far our dollar will go in a place like Uganda. Let me ask you a question, Gwen.
Sure.
How much do you think in American dollars, USD, is a soap production machine? Now, when I say that, it's an entire machine that not only helps to set the lye and set the ingredients, but also cut them into bars and to help them package the soap for selling. How much do you think something like that would cost?
Boy, I'm going to guess it's not cheap in US dollars either. So let's say $7,000.
I thought the same thing. To help these women have a job opportunity and learn a new skill, it's only $850.
$850, my gosh. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot less than I thought it was going to be. Okay.
Yeah, and that's really the case with a lot of things. And that's why when I came back from Uganda, knowing how far our dollar will stretch, and though we are strapped here in the US too, and things are expensive and everything is on the rise, when thinking about changing a life, our dollars really can do that, and for very minimal. So it's exciting to know that we can make long-lasting change for little effort, and that's exciting to me. So those are just a few of the many things that we have going on, and we're continually growing and fulfilling needs on a daily basis.
Oh, this has been fascinating and educational for me too. Thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you're doing and for having created this not-for-profit. I'm amazed by the story and inspired by your story. How can people who are listening learn more about you, contact you, and or support your trip and your mission, especially with the upcoming trip to June? I would love to have, by my count, there's still 13 children that need to be sponsored. Maybe a listener wants to do that. So how can they do that? How can they reach you?
Yeah, and we're on pretty much every social media platform except for Twitter. So we're on TikTok. You can see all the babies and have some fun with some of those videos. LinkedIn is a great resource and a way to connect with us directly. Facebook and Instagram. You can visit our website at beyondbeautyforsurvivors.org. All there is on the information to contact us, as well as sponsoring a child. We're also doing teacher sponsorships, hygienic sponsorships, and medical sponsorships as well. Many ways to get involved and like those sewers here in our local area. It doesn't matter where your jobs lie or your skill sets or talents. There's a way that you can help a survivor. Just let us know that you're interested and we'll point you in the right direction.
Well, and not only help a survivor, but perhaps prevent a future person from needing to become a survivor, which I love.
Absolutely. Help me join the fight in ending human trafficking, one life at a time.
One bar of soap at a time. Yes.
Absolutely. It's been an honor and a privilege, Gwen. Thank you so much. And thank you to these listeners. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Kelsey.